The future belongs to service providers who innovate without limits. That's why the fastest growing service providers are choosing the NetSapiens platform. Visit netsapiens.com.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and we're back with Todd Chisholm, who's the president of IFT Solutions. Todd, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Doug.
So as everyone can see, the headline is Integrated Financial Technologies. IFT has launched IFT Fortitude to access customer service compliance. This podcast is aimed directly at the MSPs. Lots of great information coming up. So Todd, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first of all, what is IFT?
IFT is a business process outsource business. So we provide services from customer service to collections work to front end sales services. So all of the things that are provided to individual businesses to have customer contact, we do in a virtual call center environment using obviously modern technology and tools to service that. And we also provide a consulting practice that works with individual companies to assess who are maybe not using our services, but other services to assess their compliance and components of their business to make sure that they're doing the things they need to in what's obviously become a much more dynamic and exciting world when it comes to technology and outsourcing.
Now, these services you guys provide, are they sometimes done in-house, but then MSPs say, you know what, it'd be more efficient if I turned to IFT?
Yeah, for sure. Our core business is exactly that scenario, right? So you think of a service or a component of a business that needs to be outsourced, maybe something like customer service is the easiest example. Doing that in a white label fashion for end user customers, but obviously working in partnership with MSPs to deliver those services. The core competencies of our business are to do those things well. And sometimes, the core competencies of existing businesses may be to focus on other things, like such as their sales process or their actual products that they're delivering.
So you guys have launched IFT Fortitude. So what is that?
Well, over time, certainly over the last 5 years or so, through our business and onboarding our own customers into our BPO business, we've been exposed to many types of technology, many type of companies that are using other services, whether that's virtual call centers, whether that's other components of their own business, and the number of issues that we're seeing relative to folks not using tools that are either not compliant, their data storage methods, all of the things and issues that are tough to stay on top of as a business operator today. We were noticing that, and we've been hired a number of times to come in and just assess the performance of those services, whether that's their call center, whether that's their third-party providers. And in all of those cases, we've been able to find gaps and best practices that we've come back with. So what we've done is frankly formalize that product we see the need, we see the gap in the marketplace of, you're probably not focused on those type of services. You're just ensuring that you're using somebody that you believe is compliant and following the rules that are not that are in place in your individual markets. And we come in and assess that and make sure that that's the case, because obviously that's extremely important to any business operating in this environment today.
So there's what I heard just now is that also this tackles the issue of compliance.
Yes.
Talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. Relative to compliance, I mean, there's a lot of services that you can use that are out in the market. A lot of apps are available, a lot of virtual call centers, a lot of operators that are not meeting the standards that many, certainly medium to larger size businesses need from a compliance standpoint. So you think of, how you use call recording, how you can just opt out services, and even data storage. It's easy to assume that those things are in place. But as we've learned in the current environment, especially with how fast technology is moving, that those pieces are often the last to be noticed. But they're very important. It can result in fines. It can result in business operational issues. It can result in stability of your provider. So we've assessed that and obviously identify that as a product that we can provide to the marketplace.
Let's stick with this for a second, because all year long, actually for the last 12 months, whenever we do a podcast that has the word compliance on it, it kind of blows up. So it tells me people are really concerned about this issue, and you kind of just hinted now. I'm hearing a lot of like the technology is running ahead of even the of the standards of the regulations.
100%. You think obviously AI and all of the tools and the interesting things that can be used there, but you do need to do it in a compliant fashion, and the technology is running far ahead of both regulatory environment, but also just the general rules that are in place for able to operating a virtual call center, as an example. Because we operate in our space with many very large regulated institutions, think of banks and other organizations that have to follow the regulatory requirements very closely. Our business has sort of been built around being at the highest compliance standard, which means we can now assess other businesses that are providing these services or other companies that are doing similar services to find out if they actually are using best practices and are at the highest level of standard as you would expect within that kind of environment.
Todd, I suspect the people that are heavily involved in things like healthcare or financial industries and so on probably, are very self-aware about compliance. But do you suspect that MSPs that are in less regulated industries are kind of forgetting about compliance sometimes?
It's I won't say that it's in 100% of cases, but I would say in any review that we've done thus far, that has been the circumstances for those I'll call them less regulated industries, or maybe industries that are fast followers as opposed to leaders in that space. But yeah, in virtually every case, we found significant gaps both in the tools that are being used and potentially their providers that they're working with.
So if you're an MSP and you're selling to, some very simple industries, I shouldn't say that, but industries historically not hugely regulated, warehousing, things of this kind, compliance is still something you should pay attention to.
Absolutely. There's a multiple different ways. I mean, you just have to follow the news of, class action lawsuits or individual, even small claims areas. But if you aren't storing the data properly, if you're not recording the data properly, if you're not putting, the right tools in place, and when requested, you can't provide the evidence, that puts you at real exposure, even in, like you said, not necessarily simple industries, but industries you don't historically think of. Everybody assumes the banks are having to follow significant regulatory requirements.
Right.
Everybody's assuming insurance companies are doing that. Everyone's assuming doctors, although the amount of gaps that we see in that space are significant as well, mainly because of the speed of technology. But certainly in the other industries that are anything that you're doing where you're interacting with a customer, where you're using a call center or a virtual call center, has compliance components depending what state or county or what part of the country that you might actually be residing in.
So how does this all work? They engage your program, but how does it trickle down to the actual end users?
Yeah, it's actually fairly simple. We can work with folks in a few different ways, but obviously, we effectively in a partnership scenario. So really, we're hired on a consultancy basis, for lack of a better term, where we're coming in and we run it like a project. So the project comes in, we send a team, both virtually and often in person, to review all of the tools and the workflows that are in place and being used today. And then we provide an assessment versus best practices, and of course our own knowledge of the regulatory environment, and then provide a report back to the individual, to the user or the customer that would require that. Obviously, working in partnership with, say, somebody who's reselling that product or working with us as a partner in that group, we also have ability to work from a commercial perspective, to come in as a third party to assist in any relevant cases where that applies.
Todd, we've been touching on the vertical markets, but let's expand on that, because the MSPs listening and channel partners serve a huge number of industries. Is this for everybody?
In the simplest terms, if you think about it, if you're using a call center, a virtual call center, a customer contact strategy, where you have inbound, outbound communication of any sort, then it applies to your industry. If those things don't apply, then there's probably other requirements that you're working on. But generally speaking, it's hard to think of an industry where those scenarios don't apply. So.
Todd, how accessible is this for the MSPs? How do they engage you?
Oh, really just a direct contact to ourselves and, of course, our organization, me directly if needed, where we can do an assessment and we can talk about what the terms would be, but also really just a review of how our process works from an end-to-end basis, from a project plan to timelines to all of the things that we would need. So it's really, we make it as simple as possible, where you don't need to be an expert. You're effectively bringing in the experts to your partner to be able to have them work with you and then provide a report.
One last question just before we wrap up. I think the personalities that are very entrepreneurial personalities that run MSPs, I think when they hear about compliance and regulation and so on, they go, this is going to slow me down. But you seem to be saying, actually, you've kind of created a simplicity here, which won't slow down the process of sales and engagement and so on.
Yeah, it's something, or operating my own business over the years in varying ways. Compliance does have the danger of creating bureaucracy that you don't need,
Right.
that feels like it's going to slow you down. The reality is that, just in the environments that we see now with the technologies in place, it'll actually slow you down if you aren't compliant, because to go and rebuild, to go and change, to switch providers midstream is far more disruptive to your business than simply being aware. But obviously, as you're operating your day-to-day business, you don't necessarily want to be or interested in being a compliance expert. That's where bringing in a third-party organization such as ours can be super helpful, where it's low touch, it doesn't interfere with your day-to-day operations, and provides you either reassurance that what you're doing and who you're working with makes sense, or if there are gaps, identify those gaps. And then, from our business perspective, we also provide many of those services. So if you determine that you're needing some additional call center services or some virtual compliance services, then those are services that we can provide you. So it needs an easy food chain, a one-stop shop, if you will, for being able to go through that. That's far less painful than trying to do it on your own or working with local bureaucrats.
Well, Todd, I really want to thank you for joining me today. Where can we learn more?
Certainly on our website, iftsolutions.com, or on our LinkedIn page, also IFT Solutions, and any of the contact information, which I'm sure you'll have on here for myself and our organization.
We'll provide all those links in the write-up and also the write-up on LinkedIn. Now, Todd, thank you very much indeed. I look forward to the next podcast. I'm sure you'll have some more innovations for the MSP community.
You betcha. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate your time.
Innovate without limits, scale without compromise, and never pay per seat again. Discover why providers choose netsapiens.com.